Okay, today we're going to look at Sicarios and the Banality of Evil. So this week we want to begin to try to look at what we might mean and what it might mean to be a cartel enforcer, a Sicario, a hitman. What does it mean to kill for hire? So first, this week I want you to look at this interview with Jon Grillo, the author of the first book that we read. Pay attention to what he says about Sicarios in this clip. How does Grillo link the actions of Sicarios to the notion of narco-insurgency? What evidence can we find that supports his claim that we've learned so far in the class? The argument is essentially this. Grillo says that the brutality of the Sicarios is because they think of it as a soldier might think of fighting a war. How does that change the nature of violence when one is fighting a war? Also, we want to look at the perspective of the Sicarios themselves. Here is one interview done by Al Jazeera called A Mexican Hitman's Chilling Tale. What are the motivations? What are the justifications that this individual gives? Do these justifications seem to support Grillo's contention that Sicarios operate the way they do because they see themselves as soldiers? Now, you're going to be reading the autobiography of a Mexican hitman. And I want you to pay attention to how this person, right, who's never named, we never learn his name because he fears for his life if his identity is known. How does he portrayed? What begins to strike you about the person that's narrating this? Also, we're going to watch a TED Talk by this guy, Philip Zimbardo, called The Psychology of Evil. And this guy is really interesting because he was actually involved in an early psychological test that had to do with how structures and institutions and rules can actually give license to people to do evil things. And in this case, a prison experiment. And then he relates it later on to what was happening in Abu Ghraib, in the torture and the sort of demeaning of prisoners in Iraq by American soldiers. So all of this brings up this notion of the banality of evil. You may or may not have encountered this term before, but I want you to reflect on this, right? What does the banality of evil mean? Well, banal is sort of mediocre, everyday, average. And after the Second World War, the Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann was captured, he was tried, and eventually sent to death. Yet one writer, sort of philosopher, reporter, Hannah Arendt, wrote a book in 1963 called Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil. And Hannah Arendt, as she was, sort of observing this trial of this Nazi war criminal, Adolf Eichmann, Adolf Eichmann never himself, as far as we know, like gunned anybody down. He didn't, sort of physically himself with his own bare hands kill Jews in concentration camps, but he was the sort of office worker, the functionary, the person in charge of the mass extermination of essentially millions of Jews and other people in Nazi concentration camps. And so Hannah Arendt thought, how do we understand the evil that's coming out of Eichmann? Because obviously he did these evil things, but yet he seems so ordinary, so average. And so what do you make of the idea of the banality of evil regarding Mexican hitmen? Can we apply these ideas to Mexico's drug violence? Right? Think about what is Arendt and Gita Sereni, who also there's a clip about her, what are they getting at with this idea that these men were ordinary, that they weren't evil? Is there a way that we can begin to understand this? And the main point of this is that what I want you to understand is that sometimes we as humans are good at calling evil things that people do as things that ordinary people would not do given the circumstances. But yet, what Arendt is saying is that all of us have the potential within us, given the right circumstances, the right institutional context, to do evil things. And so hopefully this will give us a perspective on which to look at these Mexican hitmen, these Mexican sicarios. Okay, that's what I have for you today.